Hey guys, what's up? This is Serenity, the comic book. So this is Serenity, the comic book, based on the movie Serenity, which was based on the series Firefly, which, if you haven't seen the series, is probably one of the best science fiction series of all time, up there with Lex, up there with Farscape, which I liked a lot. Farscape was a little bit hit or miss with me, but Lex was solid, it was funny. It was like a sci-fi comedy, sort of like. It was funny, but it was also serious. It was serious, sci-fi adventure, but it had like a lot of like humorous elements in it. So Serenity was great, and the movie was okay. The movie was good. I remember like seeing the movie before I saw the series. So watching the movie before you see the series is really difficult because they don't explain any of the characters or what's going on. They briefly, I guess, brief you on it, but therefore thereby calling it a brief. But they don't really like explain what the hell is going on in Serenity, and the whole story. Like, if you don't know Firefly, the Serenity might be a complete like what's going on, like a complete loss, right? But if you know Firefly, if you watched any of the series episodes, you will get Serenity a lot more. And so a lot of times what comic book people do is, there was no such thing as a Firefly comic or a Serenity comic. But what comic people like to do is create a comic book based on something that was a book or a movie or a series or something like that. There's lots of comic books based on books, and there's a lot of comic books that were created because of movies. And there were like movies created because of the comic books. And I really do think that this is not a bad thing. I think this is a good thing, where you're able to consume like Firefly in a series. But the thing is, the series had its run and they stopped getting funded after some point. But the fans were there, and the fans demanded more. The fans wanted more Firefly. They wanted more of the series. They wanted more of the characters. They wanted more stories. Because seriously, it went down for like one season or something like that. Like, I don't even know how many seasons it was, but it wasn't a lot of episodes. And maybe like at the most like 20 episodes, around there. I'm not exactly sure because I saw it a while ago, and it's not something that like really pay attention to. I just like the show. But then Serenity came out, the movie, which was cool, but still, in my opinion, not as good as Firefly. I think Serenity, the movie, the story in Serenity, the movie, would have been better as a Firefly episode, or even a double part 1, part 2 episode. Whereas the movie was 2 hours long, and the series was like, each was under an hour or so, right? Each episode was under an hour. So if you would have made a part 1, part 2 of the episodes, it would have really fit really, really well as being a good episode of Firefly. But they went out and I guess spent a lot more money, but the story didn't feel as good. I don't know if the writers were different, or it was because some people were like new and some people weren't, and maybe like the people doing the movie kind of like didn't really know how to take Firefly, the series, and make it into a 2-hour like movie. It felt like if they would have just made a 2-hour like episode of Firefly and then put it in the theaters and then sold it on DVD and called it the movie, it probably would have been a lot better. But I guess they tried to make it an all-encompassing story where it has a beginning, an end, and there's the middle part of the story and everything. So I felt like it was really, really hard to follow, but some of those action scenes were pretty cool. I think River was one of the characters, and she's like the little girl, and the movie was really about her, whereas she was not really the main character in Firefly. It was more about the captain of the ship and the crew of the ship. She was there, but she wasn't really one of the main characters. She's more like a supporting character. Even though she's an important character in the story, she wasn't really like, the stories in Firefly were not really about her. It was about the adventures of the crew, the captain, and the ship. And it was just like one of those, it was sort of like, in a way, a science fiction Western, where they were just out there in a rogue ship, flying through the universe. There was a whole big federation where the whole federation was like, they were organized, you know, but it wasn't really like, even though they had every resource there available for all the citizens of the Federation, it was not a utopia. It was a little bit of a utopia for some people and in some situations, but in other situations and other people, it was completely dystopic. Like, it was a federation. They cared about some things, they didn't care about other things. Some people were happy with living with that kind of government, other people weren't. And it was a galactic federation. Well, I don't know if it was galactic, but it was a big area of space. You know, I don't know, it was a part of the galaxy. It was multiplanetary, interplanetary. And that was cool about the show. It was cool that it was interplanetary. It was cool about that there were spaceships. And it was cool, like, even in the story Serenity, they had a woman who, one of the people was, and they show you on the cover here, one of the people, Captain Reynolds, right, was the captain. This guy's a complete rogue. Like, he just doesn't care. He's in it for himself. He's not too smart, but he's good with a gun, and they keep him because, you know, he basically for security, you know, because he's good with a gun. She's also a main character. She's one of the pilots, and you can see, like, she's operating the gun. And Reynolds and her knew each other because they were both in the army together. I think it was a galactic army. Now, I'm not sure if that was called a federation or what it was called, but there was a federation like system in the story. Okay, and so he was part of it. He was in the army. She was in the army. They were together in the army. That's how they know each other. And then so he started to captain a ship, and she went on because they knew each other. Then there was a pilot, and then there was a sort of like this woman who fixed the ship. She was like a repair person, so they needed her. They needed everyone in that ship. They need the pilot, they need the captain, they need the person to repair the ship, right? Because it was a rogue ship. This was not like a $1 billion ship. It was like a made at home, sort of like someone would take a bunch of car parts and make a car, and that car would not be made by Porsche. It would be made by the guy that put a bunch of car parts together and created a car and drove that car, you know, and it's not as cool as, you know, a Maserati or like a Porsche sports car or a Pontiac sports car or some big name like that, you know, but it still worked, and it got them from place to place, job to job, and situation to situation, episode to episode. So back into this, what I think of the comic book is that I really was psyched about getting this comic book. And unfortunately, there was only a few episodes of this comic book around. There was only like 5 parts to the series, and it wasn't a lot. And then I saw the comic book come out again. And I was just no, I'm past it. I'm over this comic book, because they really try to make this story as good as Serenity or Firefly, which I think is way better than the Serenity movie. But as you can see, even though the artwork is cool, and if you open it, the interior artwork is also pretty good. Let me just see, like, what's it good? It's all like talking heads and people talking and stuff like that. That's also the problem with the story, that it is a lot of talking heads and people talking. It is a lot more of a drama of just people together. She's the repair person of the ship. There's a lot of other characters there, you know, and they did, you know, they basically kept everyone in character. And as you can see, it's just like, they didn't do a lot with some spaceships, with some beams and some explosions, which is cool. But as comic books go, they did not do a lot with the story and the quality of the story to put in here. It was more of like a fan thing for fans. It was just a comic for fans of the series. It's like, basically when they let these out, it was like, if you know the series and you're fans of the series, buy the comic book, because this is the comic book version of the series, or a comic book version of the story, or the continuation of the story in comic book form, which I think is a good idea, right? Because the story was just like, it came and went with Firefly. It got funded, and then they did a run, and then they lost funding or whatever, and they weren't able to make any more, and they had to split up. And so people wanted more Firefly, and when you binge the series, I think it was on Netflix at the time, I don't know if it's still on Netflix, but it was, and you were able to binge the whole series. And it's very bingeable. I remember like watching like the whole thing straight across because it was so good. It was so bingeable. It's like you couldn't stop watching it. But then it ends, and it doesn't end with an ending. It just ends because they're not making any more episodes, you know. And so, and that's what happens there. Let me read something about the back of this. Now, the people involved in the comic book is Joss Whedon, who I do recognize Joss Whedon. However, I think he was sort of like involved with Firefly, and I'm not exactly sure. Then there was Brett Matthews, and then there was Will Conrad, both of which I don't recognize. And on the back, it's got some interesting stuff. It says, Better Days has everything Firefly fans would expect from the House of Whedon. Ain't It Cool News. Ain't It Cool News was this dude who did this show Ain't It Cool, and he did a lot of movie reviews, and it was a pretty cool show for a time. And then he got into some kind of trouble or whatever, and I don't know what happened to him after that, like, you know. But basically, so this one is the second comic book, number 2, and there was a number 1. This is also a very, very small comic book. As you can see, this is not a full size. Like a full size comic book is about this big, that big. This is like a small one, and it's funny because the people at the comic book store where I bought this were like trying to get me to not buy this. They were like, no, you don't want this. You want the hardcover. You want the bigger ones. But the hardcover was like the same story, but it was like it was a ton more expensive for no other reason than the book was bigger and it had a hardcover. And the story was the same, and I was like, I just want to read the story. Like, I don't care about how big it is, whatever, the hardcover. I just want to read the story, and honestly, when you look inside, it's fine. It's still, the panels are big enough, it's fine, you know? There's a lot of it. There was like there was a lot of like interesting characters. There was this woman who, this is the woman there, who was in the character, and she's sort of like some kind of like call girl or whatever. Anyway, so the back of the thing goes, when the Serenity crew uncovers a heaping pile of cash, making their first successful heist, they divulge through their most outlandish fantasies and look forward to a little R&R, relaxation. On a tropical paradise, unfortunately, these space cowboys, someone is hot on their, for these space cowboys. Like I said, it's a space western. It was very, very, it's like a western sort of in style, but it's a sci-fi movie, sci-fi show. Unfortunately for these space cowboys, someone is hot on their heels in search of a prize more precious than money. Joss Whedon, creator of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, so that's who he is, joins Brett Matthews and Will Conrad, the team that brought you the smash hit Serenity, Those Left Behind, with a new chapter in the lives of Malcolm Reynolds, who is the captain of the ship, and his roving band of space brigards in Better Days. So that basically tells you what this is. Yeah, it's good they had Joss Whedon in it because I think they got some things right in this. They had Brett Matthews. I don't know if those guys were with the original show. It says that they brought you Serenity, which was the movie, but I don't know if they were also involved in Firefly, the series, the TV series. So that's like two different things. So I don't know. A lot of times they just make a very, very like, they put a lot of sales copy in the thing on the back because they want to sell their book. And yeah, so what do I think of this book? And I like the art. I think the art is good, but I think it's a little bit underwhelming. Like, but to be fair, I think it's really hard to make something as good as Firefly. Firefly was one of these series which didn't go on for long, but was really good and should have stayed a series. And if they can get the original people together again, because they're not that much older, it's not that far, I mean, it wasn't that long ago. You know, maybe they're like several years older now, but they could still pull it off because they're still young. They were young in the series and they're young now. You know, the fans were just, they want more Firefly. They want more of these series, but I don't know what's up because it could have been anything that stopped that show. Maybe the writers didn't want to do anymore. Maybe they had a different job somewhere else doing something else, writing for someone else. Maybe people were tired of making it, tired of directing it, tired of writing for it, tired of acting it or producing it, or they couldn't get these people back together. It's like a band that made amazing music and then split up, and the fans are like, why did you split up? You should stay together. But the band people are just like, no, we're done with that band, we're done with that music, and there's nothing you can do. It's like, it was good, you know, while it lasted. And so yeah, what would I recommend? I would recommend checking out Firefly the series first, and then checking out Serenity the movie, because I think the movie makes a lot more sense. I saw Serenity the movie before I saw the series, and then I saw Serenity the movie after I saw the series, and it didn't make a lot of sense when I saw it before I saw the series, because it was just a lot of action, which was cool, but then I didn't understand who the characters were or what the hell was going on or any background, because they made the series first and then they made the movie. So then when I saw the series, all of it, I saw all of the episodes, and then saw the movie again, I was like, okay, I get what's going on in this movie, and I enjoyed it a lot more. So then, I mean, after that's done, there's really no way for them to make any more content. So the comic book is a good idea, but this series from 1 till 5 is what they made, and I think they made some more later and whatever. From what I've seen, it's underwhelming, and what I've seen is it's not that great, but I think they could keep doing this, and I think especially if they can get some of the original people that worked on the series to do this comic book, or consult with some of the artists and writers that are doing the comic. The artists are fine. The artwork is beautiful. But the writing is just, they're trying to make the TV series in a comic book form, while I think they should make the story in a comic book form. You know what I mean? It's like, instead of taking the TV series and trying to put all of the shots that you would take with a camera and put it on panels and put words on everything, you should just write a comic book that's based on the TV series, but write it as a comic book. Like, have action in it, but don't like use the same like shots that you would see in the series. Like, change it around a little bit so that it works in comic book form. Because at this point, like the way it is now, it's only for Serenity fans. It's only for, like, I don't see how anyone that doesn't know the story is gonna like this. They might, I don't know, but I don't see it. I see it as, it's a way to kind of like remember the Serenity story, remember the Firefly story, and I think it's good for that. It's also fun to collect if you're a Firefly fan and you want to collect Firefly memorabilia. These are pretty cool. Another thing is, I don't know why they made it so small. It's unusual to make a comic book this small. But the art is good. The story is a little bit too typical of the kind of stories that have already been done on the show. What they need to do in a comic book is make a comic book with the same characters, but like, think of a new story, think of a new plot, put it, like, start from ground up, think of a new plot and build a new story. Like, have the people that wrote the story for Firefly come up with, if they were going to write another Firefly story, what would they do? How would the story go? How would it pan out? You know, how would it start? What will be the plot? What will be the plot twist? Who are going to be the characters? What are they going to say? You know, and then figure that out. And then instead of going to consulting a producer, a director, and a filmmaker and all that, go and consult people that make comic books, or people that want to make comic books, you know, and tell them, you know, just make a comic book, but put this story in it. And then you could call it like whatever you want, and then it'll be that story. The thing about when they do it this way, and I think one of the reasons it fails so much, is that they use the title of it, Serenity, going, okay, well, look, the title is good, you know, the artwork is good, it's got a bunch of fans, it's gonna sell. You know what I mean? And yeah, it sold, I bought it, you know. But is it gonna stand on its own? Like, don't use the momentum of the book, the momentum of the series, or the momentum of the story, like on the series or the movie, the momentum of the fandom to go, this is the next thing, this is the next episode of the series. And they're feeling like there's not, they feel like, well, we're just going to put it out there and fans of the series will buy it. You know, so not worried about it selling. Fans of the series will buy it. And this is what happens when they do a sequel of something. You know, the first movie was amazing, like Conan the Barbarian or something like that. That was an amazing first movie, right? But then they were like, the sequel, people are gonna love it. And then they make the sequel, Conan the Destroyer, and it was completely underwhelming. People were like, this is the same actors and writer, who the hell, what? And it was completely different. It was different writers, directors. Arnold Schwarzenegger was there, but it wasn't, you know, but then the other actors weren't there. And some of the actors were pretty good, you know, but all the way they put it all together, it feels like they didn't try really to make a really great movie. You know, I think they tried to make a good movie, but they were trying to use the momentum on the heels of the first movie, because they're like, well, if you watch the first movie, those people are going to want to watch the second movie. And honestly, like, yeah, they'll watch the second movie and they won't like it, and then there won't be a third movie, you know? So that's why I think these only lasted till 5 issues, where, you know, it was just, they run out of story. You know, and I think also that's what happened with these comic books, is they just ran out of story. There was nothing for them to you know, where like a story like Serenity, like, it's a space cowboy story. You can always find another like a new chapter of that story. Like, you know, they go to this weird planet and there's these aliens and there's this adventure with those aliens, and, you know, whatever. Like, it doesn't, you know, it's not like, there are a lot of people out there who have great ideas for science fiction stories. You know, collaborate with these people, get them to write for, especially if they love Serenity, like, get some fans who are also sci-fi writers to write these stories for you, because they will put what they love about the story. You know, it's, you know, rather than just put a book out there that is only going to succeed because people recognize the name, you know, and really not have a lot in content form, which is unfortunate. So, you know, I'm glad I read them. I enjoyed reading it. I didn't enjoy it as much as the series. I didn't enjoy the movie as much as the series, because I think the series was great. It was just great, you know. And to be fair, when something is created that's so great, it's hard to duplicate it. You know what I mean? Like an artist or a songwriter might write an amazing song, and then people are like, write more, and then they're like, I can't write more. That's my only song. You know, so sometimes you can get more of this stuff, sometimes you can't. But the fact that it was tried, and the fact that they're trying to continue the story in comic book form, is fantastic. It's just that I feel like they've got to really like take it a bit more seriously, and, you know, do more with that story, do more with the story, and just get some good artists and writers to collaborate, and just get some good, like, there's a lot of like comic book creators, like artists and writers, who are fans of Firefly. You know, it's not hard to find a Firefly fan who's also into sci-fi. And someone making stories for sci-fi stories for comic books are fans, and they probably saw like Serenity and Firefly, and they probably will be able to come up with some original ideas to contribute to that story. And so get some people that really know comic books to write a comic book, because it always seems like that's when it's good. Like, you take a character, you take a story, and you put it in the right hands, they make magic out of it. They make an amazing story out of it. If you put it in the wrong hands, they're just like, well, we don't know what to do with this, and they do something, and it meets the deadline, and then, you know, and then like, it's, some people like it, some people don't like it, and there's all kinds of disagreements about what they thought of the story. So would I read it? Yeah. Would I buy more of it? I would really have to, no, I don't know. If they're good, I will, but I will have to like first basically hear good things about it before I go ahead and buy another one, because, you know, it just wasn't as satisfying as seeing the series or seeing, you know, the movie. But I love comic books. I love stories in comic book form, but, you know, there's got to be some inspiration to make it, rather than just, we're going to make it because people are going to buy it. You know, it's got to be more inspiration, and the people that go in there have to think, would this comic book sell if it didn't say Serenity on the cover, right? And if you look at it that way, then you're just going to make a great comic book, and then put Serenity on the cover, and then people are like, oh cool, it's Serenity, you know. But I think that's kind of more of like the outlook they should have, where it's like, would this comic book sell? Would it be good if it didn't have the word Serenity on the cover and people didn't recognize the story or the characters? And if they can make a great comic that, even if the characters are different and the stories and the title is different and people would still like it, then you could like make those characters in there and then put Serenity on the cover and then have a great comic book, you know, based on that. It's just like they were making Conan comic books for years, and then Conan the Barbarian came out as the movie, and it was amazing because it was done right. It was done by people that were very, very into what they were doing and doing it really, really well. So, you know, whenever there's this thing, it's like when things go from one thing to another, movie to book or whatever, there's a lot of hit or miss. But the fact that they do continue, the fact that this is a continuation of Firefly, I think is a good thing. And if the stories get better in the future, I will definitely buy these. So let me know what you guys think. Have you read like these comic books of Firefly and Serenity? Thanks for watching the video. I hope you liked it. And yeah, like and subscribe to the channel and like the video. And I will see you guys in another video later.